Welcome to the Story A Day podcast. This is Julie Duffy from storyaday.org, encouraging you to be a writer every day, not someday. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Julie here from the storyaday.org podcast. It is a new year full of promise. Everybody's talking about it, and you might have heard too much promise, maybe? A new year can feel like that beautiful notebook somebody gave you as a gift. You know, the one that's full of potential, those lovely creamy pages just waiting for your best ideas, for your beautiful prose. The one that's still sitting blank on your shelf because you can't face messing it up with your scratchy handwriting and half-baked ideas. I love a fresh start as much as the rest of us, but this whole New Year thing, it can be a lot like that beautiful notebook. It's full of promise and potential, and you haven't messed anything up yet, and everything could go right. Except if you do something, in which case things could go wrong. I always remember every year when my husband would leave sometime in the end of August, and he would drive off one morning with my children in the car, and it was the first day of school, and all was potential, and this was going to be the year when I didn't get a call from the principal, and when all their homework would get done, and yeah, it was my favourite moment of the year. But life isn't like that. Life is messy, and writing is particularly messy. Creativity is very messy. If you want to not make mistakes and to not have to struggle, don't try doing anything creative. Don't try doing anything new. Just do what's been done before and practice doing it perfectly. When I used to play the piano, I used to worry about getting the notes perfect, and that's part of it. You need to know where your fingers are going. But sometimes I would watch a performer, a really, really highly rated performer, playing a concerto or a sonata, and they would get so into it, and I could hear the difference between their performance of the exact same piece and somebody else's performance of the exact same piece, and it was all about the passion they brought to it. And then they would make mistakes. I'd be like, what? Because they would miss a note or they would flub, and they would just keep going, and the music would keep going. Even if their pinky caught two notes at one time, they would play the music with their style. And what we're doing as writers is so much harder than that, because it's not like we're just copy typing or copy scribing a story and trying to make it look pretty. We're making it all up from the beginning. We're trying to make something that's never been made before. That's not going to happen without mistakes. So let's just grab that beautiful book down off the shelf, open it up, and start scratching away in it. Make mistakes, leave ink blots, cross things out, draw doodles. After all the hoopla of the new year and the endless year-end review and goal-setting articles that flood the web at this time of year and are covering the magazines that you subscribe to, the New Year's stakes are way too high. So let's just lower them. Let's make some mistakes right away. Let's write something now that doesn't have to be perfect. You're not alone. This happens to everyone. What if you were to write something simply for fun? What if you didn't have to worry that it was any good? What if you knew that the writing itself was a triumph? That was the goal, simply to write something. Now, I know in the bigger picture, if you've been doing this for a while, simply writing isn't going to feel like enough. You're on the moment where you've like, I've been doing this for a while. I feel like there's more. And yes, you are. meant for more. If you want to take this seriously, and if you want to find readers, and if you want to progress in your writing, those are all things that you can work on. But the first step is always making a mess on the page. So we all need to find ways to to separate those two things, right? Your long-term goals for your writing, your ambitions for your writing are fine, but they need, when you take that beautiful notebook down off the shelf, if I can torture the metaphor, when that book comes down off the shelf and you begin your creative work for today, all your ambitions kind of need to go up on the shelf and just sit over there in a box, waiting. So what if you decided to write something today and not worry if it was any good? What if you decided not to judge yourself if you didn't finish it today? What if you slowed down and trusted that if you don't finish a short story in one sitting, you're going to be able to come back to it tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And your brain is going to support you and say, oh yeah, I remember this story. I know what we wanted to do with this. And you can make notes. It can be done. What if you didn't have to finish it today? And I know I'm the story a day girl, right? I try and make you write a story a day during May. Finish. I'm always talking about finish. It's so important to finish. But not all in one day. Every day. You don't have to do that. What if you gave yourself permission to work on a project a little bit today? What if instead of worrying about something good, you just worried about writing something? This week on Twitter, a writer that I follow wrote, every morning now with my coffee, instead of scrolling on my phone, I write 300 to 500 words on my trash fantasy novel. It is just for me. It is a project to learn, experiment, process things, go completely off the rails whenever I want, zero expectations. And she finished up. It is so damn liberating. There's lots of caps in that tweet, and I'll link to it in the notes. You can see it yourself and you can follow Faith. But you can feel the relief, right? There's so much to unpack in that little tweet. Every morning with my coffee, instead of scrolling on my phone, I write. Don't we all do that? We all have habits that we've fallen into first thing in the morning. I pick up my phone, and ostensibly I'm doing it to check my calendar and make sure I haven't forgotten anything. And then I spend a little time in bed, and I like lying there with my husband beside me. We're just, chilling, spending some time together. And then I end up reading social media or news or email, things that are not supporting my mood, things that are not supporting my desire to create, things that steal my focus. Imagine if instead of scrolling on our phones, we wrote 300 to 500 words. And we wrote 300 to 500 words on our trash project. A project that we're calling, and I'm not a big fan, words matter. I'm not a big fan of saying things like, my writing's terrible, and I'm just a beginner, and I'm not a big fan of negative talk. But in this instance, there's a sense of humour that comes along with calling her project a trash project, my trash fantasy novel. If you could have a trash project that is just for you, it's a project that you have no expectations for. This is the genius of NaNoWriMo, that it wasn't ever supposed to be, in the beginning, it wasn't ever supposed to be a proving ground for novels that were going to get published. It was a way to write faster than your demons could keep up with you. And that's the idea I took and ran with for short story writers at Story A Day May. There's a value to writing something and fooling your brain into thinking it doesn't matter what you're writing. And the thing that I have learned, and everyone I know who's been through these kinds of challenges has learned, is that when you can get into that state where you're like, it doesn't matter. This is just for fun. That's when the good writing happens. Now, you can't expect every day that the good writing is going to come just because you've called it a trash project or, a 31-day challenge or whatever you're doing to trick your brain into thinking that this doesn't have any stakes. It doesn't necessarily follow that everything you write in that state of mind will be good, but your chances of writing something good just go up when you're relaxed, when you're happy. Another story for you from the Story A Day Superstars group. Peyton Ellis, one of our writers, started a story, a Western, just for fun. Leaning into the tropes, going over the top was the point. Peyton told me, whenever I felt discouraged or overwhelmed about writing or life, working on that story lifted my mood. And I almost hesitate to tell you this next part because I don't want to make any promises, but that story was just published. I'm not saying that every time you write something with that kind of abandon, it's going to get published, but the important part is that it'll lift your mood. It'll give you permission to write more stuff that you enjoy. We can get so fixated on the end result and the things we feel like we should be doing. I should have had more stories published by now. Yeah, I should too. According to who, right? And if when we get caught up in that, it sucks the joy out of the actual writing. With Faith and Peyton's methodology of writing on a trash project or writing on a project that just brings joy, our goal of being a successful writer is in our own power. We can have it anytime we want it. We don't have to wait until somebody publishes us, or somebody reads our stories, or somebody says, "Yay, you're such a good writer." If we write with the sole purpose in the moment of enjoying ourselves, and with the caveat that enjoying yourself, if you're a horror writer, can mean carving somebody's heart out. It doesn't have to be all happy and comedy. Your vision of enjoyment is your vision of enjoyment. But if we can write in the moment, concentrating on enjoying the process, then when our creative energy kind of sputters out for the day, we can worry about the other stuff. But the point of writing to enjoy the process really means that you can be successful whenever you want. You can be a successful writer if you are a happy writer, and you can be a happy writer if you're actually writing and you're enjoying what you're writing and you're not worrying in the moment that you're writing it. Especially first drafts, if you're not worrying about the future. If you want some of that success in your writing life, why not start your own trash project? Why not have a blast getting messy in its mud puddles? Why not create a story for yourself that plays on all the tropes of your favourite genre and just call it your playground and go and play in it whenever you get discouraged? I won't tell anyone that you've got a trash project, and you don't have to either. Let's have some fun this week with our writing. And if you need a little direction, stick around after the break and I will come back with a writing prompt and some ideas about where you can find more. If you want to learn to write, don't read another book or article. Start writing. I'm here to invite you to consider the Story A Day 3-Day Challenge. It's a challenge and a workshop that gets people writing and completing stories in just 3 days, and it works. I'm fanatical about getting more and more diverse stories into the world, and I think yours should be among them. If you're feeling the pull to write or level up your storytelling, let me hold your hand through 3 days of short story writing. Check out the 3-Day Challenge at storyaday.org/3DC. Okay, we're back, and I did promise you that I would give you a writing prompt and some tips on how to work with that. So one of the things when you're feeling a little overwhelmed about writing or a little blocked about writing, I find one of the things that works for me is to tap into a strong emotion. One of those emotions that comes really easily is anger, or at the very least, irritation. And I kind of prefer irritation because there's a possibility for maintaining a sense of humour with irritation. So one of the prompts that I like to give is to write a story about something that irritates you. It could be something as trivial as somebody folding down the corners in your favourite book. I know that's not really trivial. Or it could be something big and dramatic and important. Again, I know the corners of your books are important, but you know what I mean. This is not life or death stakes here. You could write life or death stakes if you like. So the idea is to get yourself into that state where you can easily access the emotions of a character who is being irritated by something. All of us have that. We have people in our lives who irritate us. We have situations that irritate us. We have things that outrage us. And then in order to have that cathartic experience, write a character who is irritated to the same level by something and write a revenge fantasy story. They get to do the things that you only dream of, all those things that flash through your head as possibilities of how you could react when someone irritates you, but you don't because you're a nice person. Write that story. You're a mostly functional member of a mostly functional society, but this person in your story doesn't have to be. So read something, perhaps you can read a story where somebody does something like this, if you want to get inspired. Pick something that really gets under your own skin. I think the more mundane, the better, because it allows you to be more creative in your revenge. And that gap between the mundane nature of the irritation and the nuclear option of the revenge creates a lot of fun in a story. Whether or not you want to write a comedy story, that contrast between the mundanity, is that a word? The mundane story and the outsized reaction creates a thrill. It can create humour, it can create horror, it can create drama, whatever you're going for. Think about that contrast. When you're writing the story, don't just talk about what happens. Take us into that moment when your character snaps. Give us the physical and mental fugue state of the breaking point. And then after that, stay resolutely in the point of view of the character who is seeking revenge, because you will start to explore the fact that they see themselves as the hero of this situation. Even if the reader can see that what they're doing is like ridiculously outsized reaction to what happened. And remember, even if you're in third person, don't say things like, he was so angry he couldn't speak, but instead describe the physical sensations. What does that feel like? And go into your own body. Remember a time when you were super irritated and having to hold back. You didn't literally bite your tongue, so don't say I bit my tongue or he bit his tongue. Talk about the pounding in your head as your blood fills with adrenaline and pumps around your body and you can't act upon it. Talk about how your breathing changes. Talk about what happens to your hands. I'm making little claws here as I'm imagining this. Think about how time either dilates or compresses in the moment, and then let it rip. And then go from there, or build up to this moment. You can go either way. But I also wanted to share some tips on if you are writing a story that features anger, how to keep it fun for you. You don't want to get dragged down into a rage state yourself. So just some tips on writing stories that feature anger. You can start your story with the angry outburst and then spend the rest of it unpacking what prompted the rage, or exploring the consequences for the person's rage for all the people around them. Or you can stay with that character and show them considering themselves the hero of the moment. You can end up with something kind of satirical, something horrifying, something amusing, something very dramatic. Or you can build up to a great big angry finish. You can There's a film from the 90s called Falling Down with Michael Douglas, and this film is like that. He's very mild-mannered at the beginning, and it ends with, the film ends in a place where you would not have expected it to go if you didn't know anything about it, which I didn't the first time I was watching it. So you can lead us through the series of micro frustrations to a big finish and show the character giving in to something they've been fighting all the way through the story. Or you can get inside someone else who has get inside the head of someone else who has a very different anger response to yourself. If you are a push me for weeks until I explode kind of person, then think about writing a character who is a rage now and forget it in 5 minutes kind of person. There is such a thing as righteous anger, so think about that as an option to explore. But to avoid the story becoming too intense, I'm not sure we all need to be channeling negative emotions at the moment, use the concept of the opposite emotion to show maybe what your characters are capable of, the other emotions too. So what's the opposite of anger? Depending on the type of anger, it might be charm or humour or kindness or gentleness, generosity. You can show that in the angry character, or you can show it in the people around them. You can have an uplifting ending. You can have a more depressing, everyone gets their just desserts ending. So how can you tell a story where one character contains those two opposing attributes? You can play with making them an unreliable narrator. You could play with making them an unlikable protagonist. And think about what kind of language you'll use. If you're writing a short story, remember you don't want your metaphors to be all over the place. You want kind of a couple of different themes just to stop it from getting off track. What kind of metaphor would you use for your character? Would they be a particular animal? So the language you use around them, if they are feral, like a feral beast, your language would be about growling and slinking and things like that. If they are explosive personality, then your language might contain detonation and all these kinds of words. Do you want to use short, choppy sentences when the action is fast, or do you want to slow things down by creating that moment where time stops and and the character and the reader notice every aspect of everything in the room? How will you avoid cliches? Lots of things to think about here. But most of all, how will you have some fun with this? Remember, you don't have to show this to anyone. It's a first draft. If you don't have any ideas for how you might write this story, I have an article that I'm linking to in the show notes about finding writing ideas. And I also wrote an ebook called Breaking Writer's Blocks, which is available on Amazon, which I'll link to as well. And it's full of 60-something ideas of ways that you can get yourself into a writing state, from physical to mental to tricks to technology, all kinds of ideas in there for you about how to get the writing going. I hope this has inspired you to do some writing this week. Have some fun with it, and I will be back next week. And in the meantime, have a great writing week. Thanks for listening. Why not come over to the blog at storyaday.org and check out this week's writing prompts and articles. And in the meantime, have a great creative week, and of course, keep writing.